No one questioned Dr. Adrian Cole, and that was exactly how he liked it. In a world ruled by procedures, approvals, and signatures, Adrian sat at a desk that quietly decided outcomes. His name carried weight. When he spoke, people listened. When he signed, doors opened or closed forever. To colleagues, he was disciplined, efficient, almost cold. To the system, he was reliable. To himself, he was something more. Adrian believed chaos was humanity's greatest flaw. Too many second chances wasted, too many people saved who would only cause more damage later. The system, he thought, was sentimental, weak. Someone had to correct it. It began with observation. Adrian noticed how often compassion backfired, how many people returned again and again, draining resources, destroying lives, refusing to change. He watched them lie, beg, promise reform, and each time the system gave in, someone innocent paid the price. That's when the idea took root. If he could influence outcomes just slightly, he could improve the balance. A delayed approval, a misfiled document, a risk assessment marked just a shade darker than necessary. No violence, no blood on his hands, only consequences. The first death barely registered as a ripple. A repeat offender denied a critical intervention. The man collapsed days later. Natural causes, the report said. Adrian read it twice, not with shock, but with confirmation. The world hadn't fallen apart. In fact, it felt quieter. Soon the decisions came easier. Adrian created rules for himself. He wasn't reckless. He targeted patterns, those who had proven themselves liabilities, those who statistically would harm others again. He told himself he was protecting people who would never even know his name. At night, he reviewed files like sacred texts. His apartment was spotless, minimal, controlled. No personal photos, no reminders of emotion, just the soft glow of his monitor and the steady rhythm of judgment. He didn't feel powerful, he felt necessary. Across the city, Detective Mara Lewis hated coincidences. They insulted her instincts, and lately the city had been drowning in them. Unrelated deaths, collapsed lives, people who slipped through cracks that weren't supposed to exist. On paper, the cases had nothing in common. Different backgrounds, different circumstances, different endings. But the timing bothered her. Mara started mapping details on her office wall, names, dates, institutions, and slowly a pattern emerged. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear, just a whisper. The same department appeared again and again, the same approval chain, and sitting quietly near the center of it all was a name no one wanted to touch: Dr. Adrian Cole. When Mara mentioned it, the room went cold. "He's clean," her supervisor said flatly. "Respected. You don't accuse someone like that without proof." Mara nodded, but inside, the whisper grew louder. She began pulling files late at night, working alone. The more she read, the more uneasy she became. Decisions that contradicted recommendations, overrides that made no logical sense, paperwork altered so subtly it looked accidental, but accidents don't repeat themselves this precisely. Meanwhile, Adrian felt the shift before he saw it. People hesitated around him. Conversations ended too quickly. A glance lingered a second longer than it should have. He welcomed it. Attention meant significance. Scrutiny meant impact. He reminded himself he had done nothing illegal. The system gave him discretion, authority, trust. He simply used it better than others. Then came Case 1479. A young woman named Elena Morris, early 20s, smart, scarred by a life that had never been kind. She had made mistakes, but nothing unforgivable. Her file showed potential, education plans, a job offer waiting, genuine effort. By every standard, she deserved help. Adrian studied her photo carefully. He didn't see hope, he saw fragility. People like Elena, he believed, broke under pressure. They leaned on others, became burdens. The world didn't need more weakness. He marked the file denied. No hesitation. Days later, Elena disappeared. Her absence didn't make headlines. People like her vanished all the time. But something about the timing made waves under the surface. A volunteer asked questions. A social worker grew nervous. The file resurfaced, and it landed on Mara Lewis's desk. Mara read it once, then again. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't a coincidence. The denial made no sense, not logically, not statistically, not humanly. She pulled Adrian's previous decisions. The pattern was undeniable now. For the first time, Mara didn't see an institution failing. She saw a person choosing. Adrian stood at his apartment window that night, overlooking the city. Thousands of lights, thousands of lives. He felt calm, centered, right. Somewhere below, sirens echoed faintly. He didn't know it yet, but the law had finally noticed the man who believed he could play God, and it was only just beginning. Detective Mara Lewis knew the moment she crossed the line. Pulling Dr. Adrian Cole's records without authorization wasn't just risky, it was career suicide if discovered. But once the pattern had revealed itself, there was no turning back. Curiosity had transformed into something heavier: responsibility. Night after night, Mara worked alone, surrounded by cold coffee and flickering fluorescent lights. She laid Adrian's decisions side by side, comparing recommendations against final outcomes. The numbers didn't lie. When Adrian intervened, the result was almost always worse for the individual and disturbingly efficient for the system. Too efficient. People denied support went on to die, disappear, or destroy themselves at rates far beyond probability. Adrian's name never appeared on death certificates, never showed up in official blame, but he was always there, quietly present before everything went wrong. It felt deliberate. Mara built a timeline, each decision marked in red, each consequence in black. What emerged wasn't negligence, it was selection. Meanwhile, Adrian felt invincible. The whispers around him only fed his certainty. He believed fear was proof of truth. If people sensed his power, it meant they recognized it, even if subconsciously. He had refined his process now. No impulsive choices, no emotional interference. Every decision followed his internal code. He told himself he wasn't cruel, he was consistent. Then something unexpected happened. A man named Thomas Reed survived. Thomas was supposed to disappear quietly, a chronic offender flagged multiple times, someone Adrian had labeled a liability months ago. Adrian denied him crucial assistance, confident the outcome was inevitable. But Thomas didn't die. Instead, he lived and began asking questions. He remembered names, remembered faces, remembered the moment everything had shifted against him, and one name stood out: Adrian Cole. Mara found Thomas 2 days later in a cramped apartment, shaking, paranoid, but alive. He wasn't polished, he wasn't reliable, but he was terrified, and that made him honest. "He looked at me like I was already dead," he said, voice cracking, "like my life was just a problem to be solved." That sentence echoed in Mara's mind. People don't talk like that about bureaucrats. They talk like that about executioners. Mara pushed to bring Thomas in formally. Before paperwork could be completed, before protection could be arranged, Thomas Reed was found dead in an apparent overdose. The case was closed within hours. accidental, unfortunate, typical. Mara stared at the report in disbelief. Someone was cleaning up. Across the city, Adrian watched the news calmly. Thomas Reed's death had been inconvenient but necessary. Adrian hadn't touched the man. He hadn't ordered anything. He had simply allowed the system to correct itself. Still, something nagged at him. Thomas wasn't supposed to survive long enough to speak. Survival introduced variables, and variables created risk. For the first time, Adrian felt a flicker of irritation. Not fear, irritation. Mara's investigation stalled publicly, but privately it accelerated. She began tracking who benefited from Adrian's decisions. Budgets tightened, statistics improved, departments praised efficiency without understanding the cost. Lives were being traded for numbers. When she approached internal affairs, she was warned gently but firmly to stop. You're chasing shadows, and shadows chase back. That night, Mara's car was broken into. Nothing stolen, just a message. She understood it perfectly. Adrian, meanwhile, started making mistakes. Small ones. An email sent too quickly, a file modified too late, a decision justified poorly. He was used to complete control, but now he was reacting, not calculating. He hated that. He began watching Mara Lewis. Not officially, not directly, just enough to understand her patterns, her routine, her persistence. He saw her exhaustion, her isolation. He believed he could predict her. After all, he predicted everyone. Then Elena Morris's file resurfaced. A new witness had come forward, someone who claimed to have seen Elena after her disappearance, someone who contradicted the official timeline. Adrian stared at the screen longer than he should have. He hadn't planned for this. Mara felt it too, the shift, pressure from above, files vanishing, dead ends appearing overnight, but she also felt something else, momentum. She obtained surveillance footage tying Adrian to unauthorized access logs. Not enough for arrest, enough for suspicion, enough to scare him, and it worked. Adrian stood in his apartment that night, staring at his reflection. For the first time, he didn't see clarity. He saw exposure. The idea unsettled him deeply. He had always believed the law was slow, blind, inefficient, but now it was watching him, measuring him, judging him. The irony almost made him smile. Mara prepared her next move carefully. She knew one mistake would end everything. She compiled her evidence, encrypted backups, shared copies with someone she trusted, just in case. She requested a formal review of Adrian's authority. That request triggered an alarm Adrian could no longer ignore. The game had changed. He wasn't choosing lives anymore. He was defending his own. And as Adrian made one final decision to protect himself, Detective Mara Lewis realized something terrifying. The most dangerous people don't panic when they're caught. They adapt. Dr. Adrian Cole had always believed fear was a weakness reserved for lesser minds. Now, fear followed him like a shadow. It crept into his mornings, sitting silently beside his coffee. It whispered during meetings, disguising itself as caution. He told himself he was still in control, that nothing had fundamentally changed. But control no longer felt absolute. It felt borrowed. And borrowed things could be taken back. The formal review request triggered a chain reaction Adrian hadn't anticipated. Oversight committees asked questions, auditors requested logs. Colleagues who once admired him now avoided eye contact. His authority was intact, for now, but cracks were spreading through the foundation. Adrian adjusted his strategy. He stopped intervening directly. No more denials, no more altered records. Instead, he manipulated from a distance, nudging others into making the decisions he once made himself. If responsibility could be dispersed, blame would evaporate. But the system was slower this way, sloppier. And for the first time, Adrian missed the simplicity of deciding alone. Detective Mara Lewis sensed the change immediately. The pattern weakened, not disappeared, like a predator shifting its hunting grounds. Adrian wasn't innocent, he was adapting. She doubled down. Mara secured a quiet meeting with Rachel Kim, a data analyst buried deep inside the system. Rachel had noticed statistical anomalies for years, but had been too afraid to speak. Now, with someone finally listening, she opened everything. The data was damning. Every spike in mortality, every sudden drop in assistance, every unexplained failure traced back to decision clusters Adrian had influenced. Even after he stepped back, the residual damage continued, proof of long-term manipulation. This wasn't abuse of power, it was architecture. Adrian felt the walls closing in. For the first time, he considered escape. Not physically, he was too proud for that, but intellectually. He began preparing his defense long before accusations arrived. He documented justifications, gathered performance awards, compiled praise from supervisors. If the law came for him, it would have to wade through a mountain of admiration. Still, something disturbed him more than the investigation. The guiltless faces. He began dreaming about them. Elena, Thomas, others whose names he never bothered to remember. In his dreams, they didn't scream or accuse. They just stared. Mara took her biggest risk yet. She confronted Adrian, not with handcuffs, not with accusations, with conversation. She requested a meeting under the pretense of clarification. Adrian agreed, curious, confident, dangerous. They sat across from each other in a glass-walled office, transparency everywhere, yet nothing had ever felt more concealed. "You have an impressive record," Mara said calmly. "Remarkable efficiency." Adrian smiled. "I take my responsibilities seriously." "So seriously," she replied, "that people tend to fall apart shortly after you decide their fate." Silence. Adrian didn't deny it. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You believe systems are neutral, that outcomes are random?" he asked. Mara held his gaze. "I believe no one gets to decide who deserves to live." That was the moment something shifted inside Adrian. Not anger, recognition. She understood him, and that made her dangerous. After the meeting, Adrian accelerated his endgame. He initiated internal distractions, anonymous tips, procedural delays. He needed time, just enough for the investigation to collapse under its own weight. But the law had momentum now. Mara and Rachel uncovered deleted logs, backups Adrian didn't know existed. The files proved intent, choice, pattern, philosophy. Playing God wasn't metaphorical anymore. It was documented. Then Adrian made his final mistake. Elena Morris was alive. Barely, but alive. She had survived long enough to resurface, traumatized and afraid, but willing to speak. Her disappearance hadn't been random. It had been the direct consequence of Adrian's denial, leading her into a chain of events she never recovered from. Her testimony shattered the illusion. Mara secured protective custody immediately. Adrian learned about Elena's survival from a leak he trusted. The news broke something inside him. All his calculations, all his certainty, and yet the universe refused to behave. The one variable he had dismissed had returned to expose him. For the first time, Adrian felt real panic. Not because he would be arrested, but because he had been wrong. The arrest came quietly. No spectacle, no announcement. Just a knock, a warrant, and a set of cuffs. Adrian didn't resist. He straightened his coat, adjusted his posture, and walked out calmly. He still believed he was right. In the interrogation room, he spoke freely, explained his logic, defended his philosophy. He spoke of efficiency, of sacrifice, of necessary cruelty. Mara listened without interruption. When he finished, She slid the evidence across the table. Data, testimonies, logs, faces. One by one, his justifications collapsed. For the first time, Adrian had no response. As the door closed behind him, the truth settled in. Gods don't bleed, but men do. Dr. Adrian Cole entered the courtroom in silence. No cameras flashed, no crowd shouted his name. There was no drama worthy of the power he once believed he held. Just wooden benches, cold air, and the quiet certainty that his world had narrowed to this room. For the first time in his life, Adrian was not deciding outcomes. He was waiting for one. Detective Mara Lewis watched from the back, her expression unreadable. Months of obsession had brought her here. She should have felt victory. Instead, she felt weight. Every face in the courtroom represented a life affected by a man who never raised a weapon yet left devastation in his wake. The prosecution laid out the case carefully, not as a series of mistakes, but as a method. Charts replaced emotion, numbers replaced excuses. Each denial, delay, and alteration was traced back to Adrian's authority. The jury didn't see a monster. They saw something worse, a man who believed he was right. Adrian's defense leaned heavily on his reputation. Awards, commendations, testimonials from colleagues who once admired his efficiency. They painted him as a dedicated professional overwhelmed by responsibility, not a criminal. Adrian listened calmly. He still believed the law would fail to understand him. Then Elena Morris took the stand. She spoke softly, but every word cut deep. She described the moment her hope disappeared, not when she suffered, but when she realized someone had chosen not to help her, that the door had been closed intentionally. "I wasn't perfect," she said, "but I was trying." Adrian avoided her eyes. For the first time, he couldn't justify it. Next came the data analyst, then the whistleblowers, then the families. One by one, the human cost replaced abstraction. The jury leaned forward. The room grew heavier. When Adrian finally took the stand, he didn't deny anything. He explained. He spoke of systems, of probability, of necessity. He said compassion without logic was dangerous, that his decisions saved more lives than they destroyed. The courtroom was silent. Then the prosecutor asked one question. "Who gave you the right?" Adrian opened his mouth and found nothing. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. The sentence stripped him of everything: career, authority, identity. As he was led away, Adrian looked back once, searching for something he couldn't name. Understanding. He didn't find it. Years later, the system changed. Oversight increased. Safeguards were built. Adrian's case became a warning whispered in training rooms and offices, a reminder that power without accountability is a slow poison. Mara visited the empty courtroom one last time before moving on. She didn't feel closure, she felt resolve. Because somewhere, someone else might believe they know better than the law. And next time, she would be ready. In a quiet prison cell, Adrian Cole stared at the wall. No screens, no files, no choices. Just time. For the first time, he understood the thing he had taken from others, the right to decide. And the silence answered him back.